Welcome everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you for joining me. If you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, I'm attempting to reach my goal of 1,000 subscribers, and if you could click that button, I would greatly appreciate it. All right, we're here today to take a look at a brand new album from former Styx frontman Dennis DeYoung. This came out on Friday, May 22nd of 2020. And it's been 13 long years since his last studio album release of all new original material. And he fronted Styx for nearly 30 years. But the story of that goes back even further. It goes back all the way to 1961. And I find this really interesting that Dennis DeYoung, at the young age of 14, first played with the Panazzo brothers, Chuck and John, at that early age. And then they went through some, lineup changes and instrumentation changes, before they determined what they were going to play in their sort of formative years and everything, before finally sort of forming a band, which they then first used the name Tradewinds before changing it to TW4, which stood for There Were Four. That was 1968. And it wasn't until 1970 that they then sort of solidified the lineup with adding James Young on guitar. And finally, in 1972, 11 long years after Dennis and Chuck and John first played together, that they were then signed to the Wooden Nickel Records label. And at that same time, that's also when they settled on the name Styx. And 1973 was when they first had their sort of first taste of success with the Dennis DeYoung penned song Lady. And that song itself went all the way to number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts. Dennis would write 6 more top 10 hits for Styx during his tenure. The song Babe, which went to number 1, Mr. Roboto to number 3, Show Me the Way also to number 3, Best of Times also to number 3, Don't Let It In number 6, and Come Sail Away number 8. So a total of 7 top 10 Billboard hits for them that he wrote while he was within the group. Now in 1984, Dennis started a solo career, and he did it here with this album, Desert Moon. This one here, having had the song of Desert Moon also on it, that song went to number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100, giving him his 8th total Billboard Top 10 hit, which is just amazing. The album itself ultimately went gold. And then in 1988, he followed it up with this album here, called Back to the World, and this one had the song on it, This Is the Time, which was featured in the summer blockbuster movie Karate Kid 2. And while it didn't have a top 10 hit the way that Desert Moon had on it, having had that song as part of the soundtrack and in the movie certainly gave it a lot of press and notoriety at the time, and keeping his name within the spotlight and everything. And then in 1988, he put out Boom Child, which in my opinion is a really good album as well, but it just didn't quite take off the way that the 2 previous albums did, and it didn't really make any waves or anything, and kind of unfortunately sunk without a trace at the time. But by 1990, Dennis had put Styx back together, and they put out an album, Edge of the Century, and then that one having had the song Show Me the Way, which, as I said, was a number 3 Billboard Hot 100 hit for them again, really put Styx back at the forefront of music at that time. Unfortunately, it would be nearly 9 years until the next album of all new original Styx material came out, with the album at that time that they would do Brave New World. And so with that coming out, and should have having toured for that, but unfortunately Dennis, having developed chronic fatigue syndrome, couldn't tour, having developed a sensitivity to light. Styx chose to replace him, and so Styx went off in their direction at that time, Dennis going off in his direction at that time. But it would be 8 long years before Dennis wrote and recorded and released an album of all new original material, this one here called 100 Years From Now, which again is another really great album and my personal favorite of all of his solo records, and I highly recommend checking that one out if you're not familiar with that one. And then it would be 13 long years until we get to this one here today, which brings us presently. So we're now at this album here, 26 East Volume 1, released in 2020. And yes, there will be a Volume 2. Dennis has confirmed that. This album was intended to be a double album, but then he later decided to separate it and just to space out his release of new material here. So as I said, 13 long years. But this one here is really breathtaking in its scope and sound. There's a lot of really interesting musical choices on this and a wide range of musical styles. It's got, of course, rock music on it, sampled beats, 1960s pop, orchestration. There's even some rap on it. I think it's done really well the way that he does it. There's pomp and prog, so just everything you would expect from a Styx album and of course a Dennis DeYoung solo record. Vocally, I think it's very much like Styx, especially in the way that the harmonizing is done on it. The album lyrically is very cynical in nature, and I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. Sometimes it's good to have albums that sort of offset the bubbly pop nature of the way that things could be with the way that things might more literally be. And I also think that in the way that that's done, so in this case it deals with heartbreak, a longing for the old days, a struggle between diversity and unity. The album's also very politically charged, and of course making it a very modern day current album in the way that things are right now. The album is, as I said, also it's very entertaining, but it's very complex musically the way that it's done. Jim Pedrick of Survivor has 5 co-writes on it, and Julian Lennon, son of John Lennon, has 1 co-write. He also duets on that song. And then at the end of this, I find this kind of interesting or fascinating that he chose to do it. There's a little throwback to a Styx song on here, the song 80, 1928 or 1958, because there's the 2 versions of that bookend the Paradise Theater album. There's a version on here called 80, 20, 20, and it's like hearing an old good friend at the end of this, and just of course makes me want to run out and listen to some Styx after this. But with that song being the 10th song on the album and not being a new original, it really means there's only 9 new original songs on this. And at 43 minutes, while that's still a good length of an album, I just feel it's a little short and I wish there was more. But then again, we know that this was written as a double album and it has been separated to spread out that new musical release. So we do at least know that that is coming down the road on it. And some of the standout tracks on this, track number 1, East of Midnight, just has a very classic Styx sound to it. It's got a beautiful sublime orchestral detailing to it that I really like the way that it's done. Probably also the most classic of Styx sounding songs on here. Track number 5, Run for the Roses, is an elegantly orchestral song, and it just reaches amazing heights and very soaring, and how the vocals are done on here. I like this one too. And track number 6, called Damn the Dream, which is my personal fave on the album. Great hard edge classic sound to it, really rocks, hard like some of the old classic Styx songs. There's a lot of really great guitar work on this one. Track number 8, The Promise of This Land, has an almost classic Who-like sound to it, and the way that it's song structured, and after the early opening of it, it rocks pretty well like the classic Who songs, which is why I sort of referenced that in it. And then track number 9, which is called To the Good Old Days. And this is that duet with Julian Lennon, son of John Lennon, which he also, as I said, duets on it. And it has this aching longing in the way that it's sung. And it's just beautifully presented the way that the 2 of them do it here. So let's take a look at the album. This is the front cover of it, and I really like this sort of Art Deco feel to it and the way that he's added some of that detailing to the logo and these classic steam locomotives on it. Here's the back side that gives you the track listing, and just real quickly, there's the spine for you. And then if we open it up, this is the way it looks here. And if we pop out the disc, that's what it looks like underneath. And then here's the booklet. So when you open it up, you get the track listing here, and it starts right in on lyrics. And it goes through a number of pages of just the lyrics in here. And after we go through that for a little bit, we get to some cool images there in the middle, showing you who's performing and whatnot, a little bit more album information with some more pictures there at the end. There's the back side of that. Now, bottom line on this album, I just think Dennis still has it vocally and the way that he knows how to craft a beautiful pop song. The album, in my opinion, starts and finishes beautifully. It keeps the album really fascinating and a very entertaining listening overall. And I think if you're a Styx fan and of course a Dennis DeYoung fan, you're gonna really enjoy this album. My only negative comment on this really is just that I feel the album's a little short at 43 minutes and only 9 tracks. I mean, that was a typical length of an album back in the day. Some of his earlier solo albums have only 8 tracks, so it is in keeping with that at least. But of course, as I said, we know that this is only volume 1 of volume 2, so we do have that to look forward to down the road. And of course, we will hotly anticipate that being released hopefully sooner rather than later. All right, I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please remember to comment, like, and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts, and I hope everyone has a great day. Take care, everyone.